Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dining for Women's Google Hangout. This is the first one for our new year for 2015. Our featured program this month is Collateral Repair Project, or CRP for short. We have two guests with us today. We have Laura Haight, our tech guru. Hello, Laura. And we have Monica Greco, who is the treasurer of the board for CRP. CRP was founded in 2006, and it's a grassroots effort to bring needed assistance to refugees and victims of war and conflict, commonly referred to as collateral damage. The goal of CRP is also to foster peace and reconciliation. So, Monica, why don't you go ahead and tell us more about the program?
Hi, everyone. First, I want to thank Dining for Women for your support. I can't tell you how much it means for the CRP community and how excited I am for this program to get going. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a recent Princeton graduate. I was in Jordan on a Fulbright grant, and that's where I first got involved with CRP. Initially, I was just doing fundraising with CRP, and then one thing led to another, and I found myself there every day. The community is doing great and amazing things, and the community is also very warm. So I found it very compelling, and this led to my eventually joining the board of directors as the treasurer. So a little bit about Jordan. As you know, Jordan's in a bad neighborhood right now. It's surrounded by conflict on all sides, and as a result, it's home to many, many refugees from many nations. So now there are about 650,000 refugees in the country, and they are coming from Syria, Iraq, but also Somalia and Sudan. Now, when people think of the refugee situation in Jordan, typically they think of Zaatari refugee camp in the north. However, 80% of refugees live in an urban setting. So in Jordan, this means that the vast majority of refugees end up in Amman, the Jordanian capital. So these refugees are a pretty diverse group of people. Again, they're from many nations, but they're also many different ethnicities and religions. In the CRP community, we have all of these ethnicities and nationalities represented as well. We have Christians and Muslims, Sunni and Shia, and there are people from all walks of life as well, from taxi drivers to lawyers. And their situation is nothing short of nightmarish. They've fled truly horrible circumstances. At CRP, we deal primarily with people from Syria and Iraq, although we emphatically serve people from everywhere. And in the news, we've heard a lot about the Syrian crisis and a lot about ISIS. However, this is just the newest thing in Iraq, and we've had refugees fleeing to Jordan over the past decade from various militias. So what happens is typically these refugee families are faced with some sort of death threat, whether from a militia or from ISIS, and they're forced to pay some sort of ransom or be threatened by kidnapping or torture. And they either pay the ransom or pay the ransom and flee. And this is where they end up in Jordan. They've left their entire lives behind, all of their friends. They can't stay in contact with these people because militias can't know where they've gone. And they've also left their whole livelihoods. They sometimes come with nothing more than a suitcase or nothing more than a plastic bag full of their belongings. For women, sometimes the situation is even worse. Many of the women that arrive in Jordan have experienced rape. So like I said, perhaps the most nightmarish situation you could possibly imagine. However, when you get to Jordan, things don't necessarily get better. And this is where I'll turn to a slideshow to demonstrate. One moment. So refugee life in Jordan is not conflict, but it's also very, very uncomfortable. So when these refugee families have arrived in Jordan, often in the middle of the night, they need to get an apartment or shelter very quickly. They end up spending all of their money trying to get this apartment, and often it looks like the apartment in this photo here. It's very run down, it's in a bad part of Amman, and it's empty, there's no furniture. So then refugees will be short of money for things like basic cooking utensils, mattresses, and blankets. Then, on top of that, these refugees are forbidden from working by regulation. So this means they're entirely dependent on aid organizations or the charity of the people around them to support them. Then you can't afford to do anything, you can't afford to help yourself, and what happens is refugees become extremely bored. This extreme boredom, helplessness, and the PTSD that they've experienced from the violence in their home countries creates a very, very fragile community. This in turn leads to more domestic violence and suicide and depression. So in Jordan, the situation is eroding even more, if you can even imagine that, as the Jordanian government is becoming overwhelmed with the vast number of refugees coming into the country. Organizations like the World Food Program are cutting back, and there's lack of food, health care, and the refugees really feel that the Jordanians want to push them out. So this is where CRP comes in. CRP offers a number of programs to these refugees. Our programming is twofold. We have an emergency assistance program, which reaches about 100, or rather 1,000 individuals a month. Our food voucher program is the bedrock of our emergency assistance program. We help 40 families a month. We also have regular dispersals that can reach up to 1,000 individuals. We also do immediate emergency assistance. So I mentioned these families that arrive in the middle of the night. We'll provide them, if they're eligible, for basic cooking utensils, mattresses, blankets, heaters, that kind of thing. We also do medical and educational support. The second branch of our programming is our community center, where we have about 500 families actively engaging in English classes, women's groups, men's groups, a teen group. We also have a number of computer classes and English classes. So this creates a real sense of community. Now remember, these refugees have left their families and everyone that they know, and one of their greatest needs is having this community. So this is what we have at CRP, a very warm environment. You can even see, looking at these photos, it's sort of this is our sitting room. It's actually structured like a house. And we've built a very strong sense of community among various different ethnic and national groups. Because of this sense of community, we've also become very close to the community, and we're very in tune with their needs. We've identified one of the biggest needs as better psychosocial health and wellness programming. And this is especially true for women, who typically bear the brunt of families' anxieties and difficulties, and in turn are also less confident in their ability to affect change in their lives. For this reason, we think that women in our community are especially in need of psychosocial health and wellness programming. A second problem with this lack of empowerment is that lack of empowerment and leadership skills are particularly necessary for women. In our community generally, men are more likely to take on leadership roles, but women really are the bedrock of their families, and they struggle with many deprivations of refugee life. So their husbands, who have been the caregivers in the family, or the providers rather, now can't work. So this means that they're stuck at home, and they commonly deal with this stress through anger and violence. Refugee women also have to advocate for their children, who, because of their refugee status and nationality, are often bullied in school. So we've identified these women as people who need to be empowered, and with a little bit of psychosocial health and wellness programming and leadership skills, could become very active in our community. So this is where the program that we're doing with Dining for Women support comes in. We'll be doing this through the community center, and it'll involve 225 women directly, but the program's designed to spread organically throughout the community, again, to address these two key issues: helping women improve their psychosocial health and wellness, and also building leadership skills. So the specifics of this program, I'll go over those now, are actual psychosocial health and wellness programs. So this would include things like yoga, art therapy, and the teaching of relaxation techniques. Since we believe that mental health and psychosocial well-being is the key to activating our community in every way, not just in leadership capacity, these psychosocial wellness, health and wellness programs will be ongoing throughout the duration of the program. Something else important to note here is that these habits and these techniques for relaxation are really easy to teach and can be spread throughout the community organically. Women can take these lessons home, teach it to their families and their friends. and then we can have an even broader reach. We'll also be doing nutrition and health seminars every month. Refugees, again, are on a very limited budget, so with some training on how to best make that budget meet nutritional needs, our community will be better off. We'll also be doing leadership training for the women of our community. So this will not only help them advocate for themselves and be empowered in the community, but actually take on leadership roles at CRP by participating in our Beneficiary Advisory Council. Fourth, we'll be doing learning field trips to other women-led organizations around Amman. This way, women will be able to learn from other women-led organizations, meet role models who are facing many of the same cultural and logistical problems, and then feel more empowered and capable of taking on leadership in our community. So that's an overview of the program that we're doing and the situation for refugees in Amman. I'll turn it over to Veena now for any.
Yes. Thank you, Monica. Thank you so much for telling us about your program. Now, if you could just answer a few questions. What happens to the cases where you see a clinical manifestation of PTSD?
Certainly.
How do you deal with that?
So PTSD is a very, very serious problem in our community, and it affects a lot of people very seriously. So we don't have the capacity at CRP, we don't have trained counselors, but we have a very close relationship with other organizations in Amman, particularly with the Center for Victims of Torture. They're an international NGO which offers direct counseling for those with severe trauma. So we've been working with them a lot, and typically we'll refer people to them if we can't help them.
Okay. Are you noticing any cultural kind of confusion or pushback, because mental health issues are so touchy sometimes?
And indeed they are. However, these our relaxation techniques, things like yoga and art therapy, have been very, very successful in the past for us. It's surprising even, but our community is very, very open to it. Again, because we're so entrenched in the community, we can provide this kind of service in a way that isn't pushy, and people can get comfortable with it. And we've really only experienced success so far.
Okay. Now, what is the sustainability of some of your programming? You've been around since 2006. Have you seen people in the community come and go, or are you seeing the same people over and over again? How does it play out?
So refugee life, or the refugee life cycle, is longer than you might think. We have Iraqis who fled 5 years ago, and they're still in Amman. Applying for resettlement is a very lengthy process. But that being said, it's also one that moves. So we are constantly getting new families, and families are getting resettled. However, the Iraqi refugee crisis is already what's referred to as a protracted refugee crisis. And it's expected that the Syrian refugee crisis will also be protracted. Because of this, we'll be continuing our emergency aid programming into the future. We're working on partnerships and various ways of developing our own organization to support this financially for years to come.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Dining for Women funding is focused on the women in your community. Can you expand beyond that a little bit about the men and the young kids? You mentioned some of the programs you had, but do you have some hopes for programming for them?
Yes. So CRP it's a family center, really. We have all the families come and they're involved. We have a men's activity at CRP as well. We have Domino's night. So the men will come and smoke shisha and play dominoes, which dominoes especially accompanied with shisha is an Iraqi tradition. So this is a chance for the men to get out of the house and relieve their stress as well. We also have a number of co-ed programs, the English classes and the computer classes, and even our teen group is a co-ed group as well. So we're emphatic about involvement from both genders in most of our programming. However, this program, we expect, will also positively impact men and the whole families, as if the bedrock of the family, who are typically the women, are more empowered and also comfortable and healthy in terms of mental health, that inherently will have an impact on the entire community. Yeah.
You were mentioning earlier that you're getting people from different communities and different countries. So are you dealing with a multilingual population? So is your programming in multiple languages, or is it mainly Iraqi refugees?
We have a lot of Syrian refugees. We have a smaller group of Somalian refugees. Predominantly everything is in Arabic. Our staff also speaks English. So we haven't really had any problems communicating.
Okay. So you are working with the local Jordanians who are working with you, or it is the refugee community that is being trained to work with you?
So I think that's a great question, actually, because this is one of CRP's strengths as well. We involve our community in our programming. So refugees are forbidden from working, but all of them are really eager to do things. So our English classes are taught by refugees themselves. Our computer classes are taught by refugees. We have some refugees who were engineers who are now teaching AutoCAD, which is some engineering software I know nothing about. But they're teaching AutoCAD, they're teaching Photoshop, and we really try to make our community center actually run by the refugee community, or maybe not run, but we keep them involved so that they can direct the programming for their own needs, and on top of that, get out of the house and be involved in the community center.
Mm-hmm. Include what CRP does in terms of resettlement for these refugees, but also broaden your answer to what are their options? What are their legal options? Do they have any status in Jordan at all? They cannot buy any property or cannot drive a car, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So refugees are very, very limited. I'm not sure about driver's licenses, to tell you the truth, but they can't work, and this is the biggest thing. So really what they're stuck doing is waiting for their UN papers to be processed. They can't return to their home countries more often than not, so they're just waiting for the resettlement process to go through. Now, what we do to help this is we provide resources. We have our staff is very, very knowledgeable about how the resettlement process works in asylum seeking, and they offer guidance to the community.
Mm-hmm. Which countries are they going to?
Most of Iraqis in particular get resettled to the U.S. And keep in mind also these numbers are very small. Again, resettlement is a slow process, but many of the Iraqis go to the U.S. Because of the historical relationship between the two nations. There are also some countries in Europe that they're going to. So Scandinavia, I think France is also taking larger numbers of refugees.
Okay. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about the children? Do they go to school? Who pays for their schooling?
Right. So refugee children are eligible to go to school. However, many of them don't, because there are fees associated with going to school. Though the schooling is free, there's registration fees, book fees, uniform fees, and refugee families can't pay for this. So we at CRP have been offering to pay for some of these fees for families. We have 30 kids that went back to school this year, and we'll expand that to 60 next year. But another problem that we face there is that families sometimes think or are under the impression that they're not going to be in Jordan for very long, so they don't bother to register their kids for school. Then it gets prolonged and the kids have been out of school, and then they can't catch up. So this problem compounds. We at CRP are also, we have programming for younger kids. It's a children's activity where they can come and play and be with other kids. We have a teen group as well that does leadership training and discussions. Additionally, we just started doing a homework help after school program as well that we're hoping can supplement some of the gaps in refugee children's education.
Okay. So as we wrap up, can you tell us what are your plans for the future? What does CRP want to do as we think about 2015, 2016?
Yeah, so 2015 and 2016 will be very busy years for CRP as well. Unfortunately, the situation is not getting any better, so we're expecting more and more families. And in this winter, we'll be doing a number of winter distributions as well. Jordan is very cold, but we do heater and blanket distribution. So that's what's next on deck. But we're hoping to expand our programming to do more educational stuff for kids. And we're very excited about this program as well, and to get the women really involved in the community, get our Beneficiary Advisory Council up and running, and that's what we're excited about.
Well, thank you, Monica, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this Google Hangout. Best wishes to CRP from Dining for Women.
Thank you.
And for all at Dining for Women, please look out for our Food for Thought. Our education coordinator, Chris Worthy, has written a piece on PTSD. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time.